Hi, and welcome to our presentation. I'm Jo.
And I'm James.
That's a bit smoother this time. And yeah, we're going to talk to you today really about our lives and how we think it fits into the circular community vision, which is Lisa Marie's vision. So here, you might have to move your screens around a little bit to see us, I don't know. But our son is also in that picture. So this is us, this is our family, and our daughter Annie, who's nearly 16, and our son Oscar, who is 13. And yeah, we live a fairly normal life. We yeah, I mean, we work, we live in a house, the kids go to school at the moment, but we have lived kind of a different life. So we've lived for a while in a caravan and we've lived for a while in a bus traveling. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. We live, oh, it's not the slide I thought. Okay, we live on the Isle of Skye. So in our travels, our bus brought us to the Isle of Skye in Scotland, the northwest of Scotland, and so this is where we live at the moment. So let me just tell you a bit about what we're going to talk about. So we've done our meditation. We're just going to tell you a little bit about our story and our travels, and then look at the circular community vision and how we feel we're moving towards it. So some of the things that are moving us towards it. And then we're going to go into a little bit more detail around building and growing food and spirituality. And I guess what in the vision would be called socially engaged, but my ministry work. So James and I are going to split those between us, and hopefully we'll have questions after each one, and then we can find out what you're interested in. So that's our plan for the day or the session. So a bit about our story. So like I say, we live a quite normal life. We also used to before we set off traveling. So back in 2011, we lived in a house, in a village. The kids, well, they were little then, but my daughter was in school, our daughter was in school, we both worked, and I got made redundant. And it was for the second time in 3 years or something. And I think I had a bit of a panic. We just bought a new car, and it was kind of, we didn't know how we were going to live. So we sat and we looked at our finances, and what we realized was much of what we earned went on being able to work. So we were working to earn to pay for childcare, so we could work to pay for a cars, so we could work to pay for clothes, so we could work. So we kind of had a bit of a reassess at that point of what we wanted to do. And at that time, I was meditating a lot and was asking for guidance around what next for us. If this wasn't what I was supposed to be doing work-wise, what was next? And I got some really interesting messages, which it came in different forms, came in images, in meditations, came in animals in nature. And it felt like really clear guidance. So one of the meditations I had when I was asking what we should do, James had actually written to this couple in Yorkshire, which was maybe
40 miles.
Yeah, 40 miles away from where we lived. And they had some jobs on offer, and they were in the woods, and it felt like a total change of lifestyle. So there was a whole series of events that occurred that then meant that James sent them this email, because he was like, look at these jobs, should we go for this? And I just said, I'll just send the email and see what happens. And the very next morning there was a message back from them at 9 a.m. Saying, you're the people we've been looking for. And so I was asking all these questions about guidance, and one of the meditations I had, I actually saw this bird, and it was holding a flag. And I just came out of the meditation like, that was mad. What was that about? And then I realized it was a stork. And I was hoping I wasn't pregnant again at that point. and it wasn't a stork bringing a new baby. But when I looked it up, it was kind of all about new ideas and new beginnings. And the flag it had been waving had been white. And so the message just really clearly was surrender to new beginnings. So that really contributed for me to our move. We went to visit them, and it was kind of the middle of winter, and we were driving away about 4 o'clock. It was dark. It was way out in the country. It was a single track road. And as we drove down the road, we sat in the front. I don't know if the kids were with us.
They were. It was like New Year's Day or the day after, 2nd of January.
Was it?
Yeah.
And I turned to James and said, are we going to do this? We're going to leave. We're going to pack up the house. We're going to move into a caravan. We're going to come here. And right at that moment, this deer walked out in front of our path. And we had to stop the car, and we looked at the deer, we looked at each other, and we said, we are, aren't we? So there were just lots of messages like that along the way. So we moved, unfortunately not to this beautiful shack in the woods, but this was the site that we moved to. We moved to an old decrepit caravan that was totally collapsing. So we moved to this site called the Bivouac, and it was in North Yorkshire, and it was, I guess it was sold to us. They were very visionary, the couple that set it up, but they were not very operational, and so their operational didn't meet their vision. And so we got there expecting to move into this wonderful community where people shared childcare and where all this was going on, and it wasn't that at all. So it was pretty tough. Once we kind of worked out it wasn't quite that. But I guess we changed life. We really downsized what we had. We stored some stuff. We got rid of loads of stuff. The kids at this point were, Annie was 5 and Oscar was just under 2. And we moved, into this caravan with just a fire for heating, obviously a small amount of space, no washing machine, the dishwasher was gone. It was kind of going back in time. And difficult. We moved away from all our family. It was the summer of 2012, and it was really wet here in the UK. And there were lots of challenges around it, but also it felt like in lots of ways we had more time to spend with the children because our outgoings were so much less because we were living in this caravan. So we'd kind of swapped all the bills for this different way of living and this new life. So after 6 months of being there, we ended up kind of homeless. They couldn't keep the caravans on site. They had problems with planning, and we ended up moving to the next farm, and the farmer on the next farm towed us on the back of his caravan, on the back of his tractor, this great big caravan down the lane, round the hairpin bends, up the steep hill, through the ford, and onto the next farm. And we thought all our possessions were going to fall out through the bottom of the caravan. The floor was so rotten. But it was an adventure. So we moved to the next farm, we lived there, and we had challenges with the weather. We had 4-foot snow drifts. We had no water for 2 weeks while it was all frozen in the winter. So there were lots of challenges with it, but there was lots of good times too, and really good times with the kids because we just got to spend so much more time with them because we just weren't working. James was working. But even then, we were living on site so that we didn't have travel, and we would meet him after work and go for a walk.
The kids would be, join me at work. They would be part of that day rather than coming home to them in the evening. They would come and join me.
So we lived that life for 2.5 years, and James did various jobs from chef to cafe manager to handyman. On the site, and I think learned a lot about building really on that site and maintaining. And they were really frugal. They built these beautiful shacks. There were 6 shacks in the woods and I think 8 yurts and a bunk barn and a cafe. but everything was kind of rustic and beautiful, but they paid as little as possible for everything. So they did it really. We learned a lot from them in terms of how they went about things. So 2.5 years, and somehow we both got this message in the same week to go traveling, and we had thought we'd take 6 weeks to go traveling before Oscar started school, because we'd made a big trip before Annie started school when we went to New Zealand and traveled with them for a month, and got married out there. So we wanted another big trip. So we decided we'd travel in some holidays for 6 weeks, and we needed a camper van or something, but we weren't sure how we would do it. And somehow, like, I was working away and I came home and said, I've had this idea, we should get a camper van and travel. And he said, yeah, me too.
That sounds cool.
We're like in the same week. And then it became to travel for a year. And I was teaching meditation at the time, and I felt like I got a calling to go out and teach meditation to 500 people. So the plan then became, it all evolved. We didn't know how we would do it all. We just bought this map of the UK. We decided we'd go around the coast and we'd go clockwise. We didn't have savings to do it. We bought the bus that we eventually then lived in on a credit card, but we did it up really frugally. So we managed to acquire timber off friends and buy stuff off eBay, really cheap. And I was going to teach meditation around the coast as we went. And I was also working as a coach and facilitator at that time, 2 to 4 days a month for an organisation, and I could do it whilst I was on the road. So that would keep some income coming as we went. And we decided that you would exchange your labour.
Yeah, for places to stay and do handyman type work where we were staying, up small holdings or.
Yeah. So we used the Woofing website and HelpX website to do that, and just found places to stay as we travelled. And so the plan was to travel around the UK coast all the way in, well, not the coast of Ireland, but just mainland, kind of England. We went down the east coast, along the south, up the west, taking in Wales, into Scotland, and then round Scotland and back down into England was the plan in 12 months. And 12 months on, we were nowhere near having finished that. We spent 3 months on the west coast of Scotland, which is so beautiful, and totally fell in love with the west coast of Scotland. And so we never made it around. We just stopped. And we found a project to get involved in here on the Isle of Skye. And so our daughter wanted to go back to school. She had enough homeschool. And so we decided we'd stop for the winter and we'd just see how it went. And here we are 7 years later. So it went fine. We did a winter and decided we could manage the weather, the winds, and all of that. And then the spring came and we said, now we'll try and see if we can do a summer, because it gets busy with tourists. And then we have midges as well here, which it bites. So can we do the tourists and the midges? So we decided to stay anyway. But we couldn't find anywhere to live. So we ended up living in our bus for 4 years. And Annie was 12 by the time we moved out.
Yeah, Oscar was 8.
And Annie was 12. And she was at high school. And we'll show some pictures. But when I should flick through, this is the bus that we moved into. So it was an old mobile library, which we converted. So James did all the conversion and converted it into home. So we still lived in it. We lived in it for 4 years. We kind of extended it and adapted it and changed it to fit us and where we were at in our lifestyle. And we went from, not really working, I guess. We then ended up living in it as a family. The kids were bigger. We were running 2 businesses from it. as well as just doing life. So it was pretty squashed, cramped by the end, wasn't it? We outgrew it.
We definitely outgrew it.
But we couldn't find a house here. It's really hard to get housing here. And in the end, 4 years later, we got a house. So we've been in this house. What? 4 years? Yeah, it doesn't all add up. But we were on the road, weren't we? So we were on Skye for 3 years in the bus after we landed here, and then we've been in this house since then. But the longer term, so this is Skye, and that's not far from where we live, and kind of the view of our plot. So we live in a rented house at the moment, but our plan is to build here. So that feels like the next big adventure. So here the land is divided up into crofts, and those crofts are owned by people, and they have to be like farmed in some way. So sometimes that's people just graze horses on them or sheep, and some people grow on them. So we didn't have enough money to buy a croft. We just have a small portion of one which has been decrofted, so it's just a house plot, but it's bigger than the plot that our house, this current house, is on, or anything we've ever owned before. And the woman who owns the croft is up for us doing some growing on some of her land as well, so we can take some extra pieces of land to grow on there. So this is our plot, and we just recently got a yurt, so that's our yurt, which we totally love, and really love that circular space. It's definitely caused a few conversations in the community. Lots of people walk past and oh, what's that all about? So that's our yurt. And we at the moment, like, we don't rent it out, but we stay in it and just go and hang out in it. And also I might run some meditation. I've run a circle in there, and I might run some meditation sessions in there as well. So, but that's our plot, and that's our longer term. And longer term than that, the plan is to build in hempcrete. So our house on the plot we think at the moment, James keeps shifting on this, but we think it'll be hempcrete.
Yeah, I think it will. But I'm continually researching and changing and evolving ideas. So
originally,
that's currently where we're at.
Originally, I thought we'd build in straw, but it's looking more and more like hemp. So that's just a little bit of our background and our story to kind of fill you in as to how we got here. In terms of the circular community vision then, when I had a conversation originally with Lisa Marie about this, she was sharing some of her vision with me, and it reminded me of a meditation that I'd done a few years ago. And in this meditation, I had this vision of cities built like this, geodesic domes, but they weren't built of anything made of matter, they were of light. And there were lots of them, all different sizes, connected like these. And it felt very much like this idea, the physical circular community. So a different model than the one that came to Lisa Marie, and this cylindrical structure, but still a circular community. And for me, I don't think my vision is as clear, or for us, I don't think the vision is as clear. I think those words that I shared in the meditation, the contemplation at the beginning, all resonate strongly. And I believe that we are at the point of the great turning, as Joanna Macy would say, and we are moving to a new paradigm and a new world, and that the structures of this world will fall. I do believe that, but I'm not so clear on that vision. And I think for me, a lot of that is about visioning that still, and imagining that, and dreaming it into being, so that we can then dance it away. So I feel like if the vision is there and there's those things that we've talked about, then it feels like through the guidance we get, we're moving in that direction. So it's almost like we're not consciously choosing that vision, it's choosing us by the guidance it's given us, if that makes sense. So as we worked through how that's happening, it felt like, well, there's a whole chunk of learning from exploration, and that's a lot of what came to us on our travels. And then we've been learning new skills, which I keep terming our apocalypse skills. Like when we look back, it's like, oh, we gathered this whole bag full of apocalypse skills, so that when everything goes, we are still able to clothe ourselves, to eat, to grow, to have energy, to build, to do all the things that we need. And I think when we moved into the house, we did do some intentional changing of habits, and we chose, you know, did we need to buy? When we needed to buy, let's buy in natural materials. Let's really get hold of recycling, composting, and start to do some of those things. So we thought we'd share some of those with you. And then our career choices, too, which are all then moving us incrementally towards a vision. So then we'll talk to you a little bit about some of those in detail. So building, growing, spirituality, and my ministry. Does that make sense? So if we look first at this learning from exploration, when we, hang on, I need to find some notes. When we moved to bivouac, I mentioned to you that it felt like we had this idea of community sold to us, and it wasn't quite there. So really, what I want to share here is just some of the learning for us about living in community. So like the reality is not always the vision, is the first thing, and things like shared space, shared childcare, shared education, it felt to us like it only really works where you've got shared values. So our values felt quite mismatching. You know, they lived very differently to us in terms of how they brought up their children, who they had around their children, what childcare looked like to them. And it didn't feel like it fit with our values. So it felt really difficult to integrate then as a community. And it feels like to live in community takes a lot of communication and constant communication. So it could very easily feel like we weren't getting on, but we just hadn't managed to talk that week, or the week before sometimes. So it really feels like some of the learning for us was, if you're going to live in community, you've got to give to a community like you give to a relationship. You need to invest in it, and have time to do that. So yeah, I mean, that felt really difficult. And at times it felt like there was a balance or a lack of equality in the relationship between us and them. And we were going there to help them set up this glamping site. There was a bit of a mismatch in their vision. So it was built on land that's owned by wealthy people, and it was set up as a company. But the way they had always seen it and the way they still talked about it was as a community. And there were some kind of mismatches in that. So often it would feel like they expected more of us than we could give, or we were prepared to give. So there's this thing about often about expectations we found in community as well. So that was there. We did some woofing and helpexing as we travelled around and stayed with different people on their land. Always, you know, on other people's land, which in itself can feel quite difficult. But this picture was actually in the national newspaper here. We did an article which was about our travels, and they wrote in there that Annie Annie, when she wasn't homeschooling, always with the chickens, and she still comments on it today. She was like, I just fed the chickens every day. So yeah, I mean, there was so much good about living with different people and exploring their way of life, and also some challenges as well. So this project, James was doing some joinery work for them. And when we got there, nothing was prepared for him to do that. Nothing was already in place. The materials weren't there. And I think we were only there for a week. And so we had this desire to kind of add value and to offer something in return for us being there. And it was really hard to achieve that because there just wasn't enough time and the materials weren't there.
They were just happy sharing their space and having people around. And I think they just, yeah, that was the main reason they did it.
Yeah. So again, like being really clear about expectations and what this exchange is about for you, because we were still in this kind of speedy, normal life of delivering and working all day, you know, and they weren't expecting that from us. But we also learned some more skills about being frugal there. They kept pigs. And Dave, whose pigs they were, used to go to the market every week and get all the waste vegetables from their stallholders and bring them back to feed the pigs. But anything that was any good, we would eat for dinner. So he would cook it up and we would eat it for dinner. So yeah, just different ways of living. They grew a lot, and there were things kind of falling off the trees, and there was fruit growing. I ended up preserving. He was making wine, which he did with the kids one day. Just there's so many things to learn from different people. We went and stayed here, but not in this house. So this is a National Trust property in the south of England called Owlet, and we parked our bus by their gate. And so there's two parts of one family that live here, and it's their grandfather or great-grandfather that built Owlet. And there's a whole story that Dickens apparently was invited to dinner one night, and he was supposed to go for dinner, but then he double booked, so he never went. But they host Dickensian parlour plays in one of their rooms. And Camilla, who lives there, is a meditation teacher, and she came across my website online and invited us to go and stay. So we went and did we have a week and then go back?
Yeah, we may have stayed there 3 weeks in total.
And James, the exchange there was their grandpa's old workshop. Yeah, you say.
Yeah, it was full of old woodworking and just collection of stuff from time, and they wanted to turn it into a tea room, so when they opened the gardens in the summer they could do a little honesty shop tea room. So it was a case of clearing out the workshop and then building benches and tables.
Yeah, it was fab. And they had a daughter who was Annie's age, between Annie and Oscar, I think, and they kind of just made best of friends immediately, ran around together. There was big gardens and land. So we learned lots from them around, you know, they had a walled garden and just trees and the flowers, and they opened their gardens to the public. So they were pretty fabulous. Yeah, and they had lots of people coming and going. Camilla was running meditation retreats and meditation evenings, and it was just fab to experience their way and how they live. I think for me at times, because I didn't do the swap, so as we travelled, I would go off and work for a few days and then come back. And James was always the one swapping his labour for somewhere for us to live. And often I felt like, I don't know, I kind of excluded myself somehow from the whole experience. So I think that was a learning. Like, I definitely need my own space, but I can easily step too much into that and exclude myself from the community. So another place we visited was Lammas, which is an eco village in Wales. And we expected everyone to be big hippies when we got there, and we were on a 40-day vegan diet, no sugar, no alcohol, no this, no that, no the other, and it felt like we were the biggest hippies in the village. They weren't that alternative at all. But yeah, we got to explore the site there. I mean, this picture doesn't show that. This is their communal space. Is it straw with living room?
Yeah, I think that's a straw bale.
Timber frame.
Yeah.
This is also, you'll see their compost loo. The shed to the right is a compost loo, and then there was various houses all around, built out of straw, built out of timber frames, some were cabins, a real kind of mishmash of different styles of houses. And what I learned from there was about community. And I was like, is everybody, there was actually plots for sale. They showed us round as prospective buyers of a plot there. And I really wanted to know about the politics in the community and what happened when things went wrong, and did everyone get involved in the community. And it sounded like, yeah, the politics were just as bad as they would be anywhere else. Some people got involved and some didn't. And I was really interested to see how they were growing over the winter there. And also there was this funding available at the time in Wales. It was called One Planet funding, something.
One Planet Development.
Oh, Development Fund, was it?
Yeah.
Something like that. And you had to write a business plan basically to show how you would live sustainably. And if you could do that, then I don't know. How was it funding?
No, it wasn't funding, but you had to generate a large percentage of your income from the land you lived on. So it might have been 60% of your total income had to be directly from the land that you worked. And the house you built had to be very low impact, ecologically sound kind of building. So that's why it led to such a diverse kind of range of buildings there. Some of them quite experimental.
But it was really interesting to think about this One Planet development and how you could live off the land and how you could create income from the land and what constituted that. There was people there making, say, skincare products, but they weren't growing all the ingredients on the land. And it made us question, well, what is truly sustainable and how much can you buy in and all of that. So that was interesting to explore. And we'd had some friends in Yorkshire who were pretty much self-sustaining. They had an orchard and a forest garden, and they kept pigs and had greenhouses and raised beds, kept chickens, and they were managing to sustain themselves apart from their dairy. And they bought their dairy and they preserved some stuff, sold it, and bought in their dairy. All their dairy products. But everything else they were managing to including, they swapped a pig and some vegetables for their rent. So they were managing to sustain that way. So it kind of raised some of those questions again about how much is self-sustaining. And this is, you can't really see from there, but he's whittling hazel stakes. So that was one of the he's 4 there. That was one of the straw bales that James built on our trip. So this was actually living on the driveway of some friends for nearly 3 months, whilst James built this straw bale meditation space. And so that had different challenges. Living with friends. I mean, it feels like there's more at stake when you live in community with people you already know, because you've already got a relationship with them. So how to maintain that. And I think for us, we're all different, and we've all got different levels of being sociable. We've got different values. We have different space requirements. And so just all of that needs working out, I think, when we live together in community. But it's brilliant to learn from others and how they live too. So moving into living with less and the lessons we learned living with less. So this is the fire and the bus. Some of these pictures are a little bit, but what we learned from living with less was, yeah, I mean, how much resource we needed. So how much wood we needed for the fire, how much water we put in the tanks every day, how much electric we needed, how much gas. It's really obvious when you live in a vehicle like this, you know, because your gas doesn't come through any pipes. It's in a bottle. Your electric you've got to plug in for, or you're on batteries. So you know how long it lasts. You've got 90 litres of water in the tank, so you know how many showers you can get out of that. So I think it really made us much more aware of what we were using and how we were using it. And then some of the tasks, you know, this was our kitchen in the bus. There's no dishwasher there. Some of the tasks became much more intensive. You know, washing up, washing the clothes. We didn't have anywhere to wash the clothes, so we had to go to the laundrette. And that took hours of time to take the washing from 4 of us when, you know, we lived on farms and lived in wellies all the time, constantly covered in mud. So it took a lot of time to do all the washing. We really didn't have a lot of space. So you can just barely see on the right of that picture, the cupboard door. That was mine and James's wardrobe for 4 years. So it was a tiny space. So when you live in a small space, you just can't buy new stuff without getting rid of old stuff. So you just don't buy stuff, or we didn't buy so much stuff. I just had lots of scarves to make it look like I had lots of different outfits. I just wore the same clothes all the time. And you've got to get really creative about how you use the space. So this is our bed on a pulley over the lounge. So the same space was the lounge, which had a flip-up table that became the dining room, with a bed that lowered from the ceiling, which then turned it into the bedroom. So yeah, needed to get really creative about how we use the space, and do what we can with what we had. This was our little herb shelf in the kitchen. This was our only space for growing when we were in the bus. I said we were running 2 businesses out of the bus at one point. This was our office. It was a cupboard with 2 shelves, one for folders and one for a printer. That was it. So yeah, just get really clever about space. And also we felt like we had to adapt. So James built Annie a new bedroom when she outgrew her bunk bed. So the kids had bunk beds at the front of the bus, above where we sat to drove, and we had the bed at the back, and then there was a bathroom and kitchen in the middle. And then Annie was outgrowing her bedroom.
And she was 12 and at high school and needing a bit more space. So we were kind of looking for how we could add space, and this was the solution that I came up with, is to put this bubble on top of the bus that Annie had as a little space. She could climb up through the old skylight of the bus into this bubble on top, and have a bit of her own space, on privacy.
Yeah, and I just worried the whole time she was in it, because Skye's so windy. I used to bring her down with her mattress and make her sleep on the kitchen floor when it was windy, because I was scared the bubble was going to get pulled off and she was going to end up in the lock. So also we had to choose what we took with us, like prioritize, and we took our Christmas decorations with us, both in the caravan and then in the bus, because that felt really important to us. So we found space for a shoebox for our decorations. So on to homeschooling and what we learned about homeschooling. The kids were really young. I think if they were older, it might be different. But really, what was important was that they kept their spark for learning, and that they really, wanted to learn. That we gave them the tools to learn. So Oscar got a toolkit when he was 3 for his 3rd birthday.
He was always taking my tools. When I was working on anything, he was taking my power drill and just drill random bolts and things, or take my screwdriver away. So I bought him his own little power driver and tools. So yeah, he could do whatever he was. Pleased with that.
I think then on one of your jobs, somebody was borrowing Oscar's screwdriver.
Yeah, thinking it was a toy and saying it was, oh, this is really powerful. I know it's a real one.
It's a proper one. Yeah, so just and in, you know, other ways, giving them the resources that they need. So it felt like we didn't have to teach them much at all. With Annie, you know, this is just, she loved climbing. So following their interest, taking them to do the things that they love to do, and finding opportunities to learn wherever we went. So this is a remote island off the Isle of Skye. It's the Isle of Rum. And this is just in the community centre. We went in there and there's a whole drum kit there. So, you know, just any opportunity is for learning. And there was no delineation between school and home. So, you know, we take them places all the time. They didn't sit down and do a school day. We just learned as we went. This is her playing Scrabble. So just using opportunities, games to learn. And we visited lots of places, so museums, galleries, libraries, castles, learnt a lot about the coastal history of the UK, just taking every opportunity to learn. This is them, our picture's so funny, exploring
tunnels in Folkestone, I think, on the south coast of England, that they were used during the Second World War as air raid shelters. Yeah, that was just a day spent exploring down there. Yeah. And learning some of that history. Yeah.
So just taking every opportunity to learn. And then also we did things like, this was a lovely lady who lives on the south coast of England, and she paints pebbles and she does Reiki. And she was coming to learn meditation with me, but she messaged me to say she didn't actually have the money that she thought she'd had. She had to lend it to somebody. And so we did an exchange. So Annie learnt to paint pebbles with her and she gave me Reiki and I taught her meditation. So yeah, just opportunities to find people to teach them things along the way too. So that's some of our learning from exploration, and we take all of that with us, you know, as we move forward in this towards the circular community vision, what we've already learned from our travels. And then there's a whole set of new skills that we've learned along the way. So is that the first one? Oh yeah. You want to say a bit about that?
So yeah, learning new skills along the way. This was the second straw bale building I built, but I guess I fell into building a straw bale building whilst we were traveling, almost by. Kind of, yeah, but yeah, built a straw bale meditation room, and it just led on to things. So I think it was just being open to learning new skills led to a chance meeting with the UK experts in designing and building straw bale houses, and I ended up joining them as an associate designer. Working on their projects around the UK, and then yeah, leading to lots of different things. So Emma, who you can just see on the right of that picture, I met when early after moving to Skye, and it turned out that Emma also worked with Strawworks, who was the straw bale builders I was working for, but our paths had never crossed. And we got to know each other when we both moved to Skye, and we ended up working with each other for a couple of years, and it was just interesting where that went, and the type of building that I was getting involved in. This straw bale that you see here was was built with a lot of volunteer labour, so people from around the community came and got involved for a couple of days or an afternoon or a week, whatever they could spare. So it was a little bit like how buildings were built in the past, with community effort, everybody getting involved.
And volunteers from further.
And volunteers from elsewhere came to learn, like we did when we were travelling on the Woofing. Nicola, whose house this was, she advertised for people to come and help. In exchange for their labour, she would feed them and house them for the duration. So, and then once, when we were on Skye, I was just looking for interesting things to do and learning new skills, that kind of stuff. So I went across to the east coast of Scotland to, this is a community called Newbold House, and they ran day courses and different things. So I went across there, I did a day learning how to build geodesic domes and all the ins and outs of that, and I did another day learning how to build a small wind turbine out of all recycled parts, so all plastic barrels, bicycle wheels, and motors from kids' Segway toys, which was just interesting and fun way to spend a weekend.
And I'm hoping you're going to build us a turbine.
And I'm hoping to. I'm looking to build it was a couple of years ago when I did it, but it's perfect for just sitting behind the yurt and giving us some light, a little bit of power down there. So hope to build one of those soon.
And a shower. That'd be cool.
And another new skill I've learned over the recent years was I wanted to, again, looking for things to get involved in, and I went along to an evening class locally in the local high school where they repaired and built traditional clinker-built fishing boats. So these are boats that would be built in the same way in a similar way since the kind of Viking times. So I spent a bit of time learning those skills, repairing a few boats, getting involved in building new ones, and then I decided that I wanted to build my own boat. So I set upon building a sea kayak. And
mainly because there wasn't space to build anything.
There was a lot of people. There was 4 or 5 people all trying to work on a small fishing boat, and it got a bit crowded at the time. So I thought I'll set myself a challenge and a project. So I was looking at plans for sea kayaks, and I debated whether to build one from a kit or one from scratch, just with the plans. So I bought the plans, and this is the result of that work. So it's a plywood and cedar strip built sea kayak, which in the end took me 4 years to build. Was finished during a lockdown in 2020, was it? So it was just built one evening a week for 4 years.
Yeah, and she's beautiful. She's called Citrine. And this is her on her maiden voyage. So she was blessed by the water there, and has a citrine crystal inside her. And then you went and had paddled about to just make sure she would not sink. And she sits beautifully in the water, and she goes out not as regularly as you'd like, but
no, but yeah.
And the only time the citrine crystal hasn't been present, he capsized. So beautiful boat. So I'll flick through these really quick, but some of the other skills, there's a pop-up pottery here we like to go and throw pots on the wheel. These are not obviously expert skills, we haven't perfected them over 4 years, but they are things that we're learning to do, and the kids love it. So we go A couple of times a year probably at the moment, but there's someone down the road who's got a wheel who I'm trying to encourage to set up a more regular space. This is a skirt, if you can't tell. I've done dressmaking course here and started to make some of my own clothes and to cut patterns from my old clothes. So again, skills. That's a really blurred picture of preserved chutneys. Yeah, the more we're growing, the more we're then creating chutneys and jams. We've got a bit of a blackcurrant farm going, so we usually get, well, I think last year we had 5 kilos of blackcurrant. This year we'll get more because we took about 15 cuttings from it. So all that needs jamming. And then I think this is courgette and onion chutney, because we had a bit of a glut of courgette or zucchini for some of you, and onions at the end of last year. Knitting. So this is, you know, there's a lot of sheep kept here on Skye. There's a lot of people with skills using that wool and the yarn. So they're spinning and weaving, knitting and crochet. So I've got involved in a bit of that. Before I was super busy here and I had more time, I used to go to a knit and natter group. And so before that I could knit, but only like straight things. So now I can, if I can remember, I can make socks. I've not made any for a while, but I went through a phase and made about 7 pairs of socks. So this is weaving, and really this, for me, is the next skill. I really want to willow weave. There's a couple of people here that make incredibly beautiful baskets, grow their own willow, and I just really like to get into that. So this is Annie and I on a short workshop making willow fish, and we made willow leaves another day. But yeah, I'd love to do some basket weaving, and I think just weaving in general. I mean, I'd love to weave tweed. You know, Harris tweed is woven not far from here, and there's people on Skye that weave with old Hattersley looms. My family, my heritage, my mother's mother was a weaver, and I think they all were going back in Lancashire. So yeah, I'd like to develop those skills some more. So that's some of our learning new skills. And again, it's like we didn't set out to learn these skills that take us in this direction, but looking back, that's what they've done. You know, we've followed our interest, we followed the guidance, and it's moving us in this direction. So some of our changing habits. I mentioned that when we moved into the house, we started to do some things differently. So this is the veg boxes that James built outside the house. They've all got poly lids, so they're little polytunnels. So this is our strawberries this year, which have been better than we've ever had before. We bought those as plants. We've got chives in there, and in the others we've got spinach, rocket, and various salad. On the other side we've got another veg bed, which we had onions in last year, potatoes the year before. We've tried greens, but they just get slugged. They just don't survive at all. And this year we've got mainly blackcurrant.
Potatoes, blackcurrants.
Some potatoes. And a bit of hemp.
Poppies.
Oh yeah, we've put some wildflowers in. So, oh, and that's not the next picture. Ooh, okay, I'll come back to that. The other thing we did when we moved into the house was buy a hot bin. So this is about 200-litre bin. This is just the lid of it that you can see. But it's just a big polystyrene box with a thermometer on it. We don't have a very big garden in the house that we're in, so we couldn't really compost or have big beds where you can layer everything and move it around. And we were a bit worried about attracting rodents or something. So this is really contained. And we put all our veg waste in there, and then we get compost that we can use on the garden. So that's changed. I mean, that's really reduced the amount of waste in our bin. Our landfill bin is a bag or two every 2 weeks.
3 bags maybe, 3 small bags
every
a fortnight.
Yeah. So that's gone down massively from what it used to be. We started buying, luckily we've got a zero waste shop, which is literally down the road. So we get an organic veg box, which isn't that local. It comes from a bit further away. So sometimes when we're growing, we can stop this and other times not. It depends how much we're on the growing, but the last couple of years life's been really busy, so we haven't managed to grow so much. But this comes without plastic and without packaging, so that's how it arrives. And also we buy refills as well, so they do a lot of refills, so pastas and rice and flours, sugar, nuts, cereals, so toiletries, cleaning products. Yeah, so we buy as much as we can, zero waste, so that really cuts down on the waste. And we've got soft plastic recycling here now as well, so that is also cuts out a lot of waste. Yeah, I guess we manage our garden differently to our neighbours. Most of them have a lawn and just mow it. And we've planted clover in it, and we've got lavender, we've got poppies growing. I think we've got some borage in there. We just keep throwing wildflower seeds at it and just see what comes up. Yeah, but we're mowing it less and less as the seed kind of takes over. Yeah, and love it. It's so much more interesting than other people's gardens. These are flowers grown on Skye. In our climate, it's really difficult sometimes to grow flowers, but we're just trying to buy more and more local. So that's just an example of that. Yeah, and trying to just reuse. So this is old furniture that was pretty wrecked when we moved into the house. And yeah, instead of getting rid of it, we've just renovated it and tried to bring it back into use. And healthcare, I think we've changed healthcare over the last few years as well, using much more oils, learning about them, and also herbs, and working with herbalists rather than working with a GP and general medication. Not that we generally have much, but we do use it as kind of preventative quite often. So some of the habits then we've changed. And then our career choices. Who's that motley crew?
This is the group of fellow students of mine that, from the Centre of Alternative Technology in Wales, where I've been doing a master's degree in sustainable construction, green building. So I made a choice a few years ago to kind of move away from building with high impact, high energy, high embodied energy materials, and materials that I didn't particularly like working with. So this was a choice that I made, and it's going well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is me in my minister role. So this was a wedding I did this summer. But I when we first moved to Skye, I did an art course here for a year. And at the end of that year, the tutor was questioning, did I want to do a second year? And I realized I wanted to put my focus back on my spiritual growth. And so I was looking for different things to do. And I looked at an animus retreat on the Isle of Iona with someone who was trained up through Animus Valley Institute. And it was too short term. I wanted something longer term. I looked at various things, and what came to me anyway, it felt guided, was to do my interfaith training. So I was ordained in 2020 as an interfaith minister. And my ministry is varied, which I'll tell you about if we get to that point, but we might not, because you might just be too interested in the building. Yeah, so yeah.
We will.
If not. So looking at how I move into our division in more detail, first looking at buildings. James is going to tell you about some of his projects.
Mm-hmm. So I think how my journey in sustainable building kind of evolved. I think going back 10 or 12 years, I got into doing and working at the bivouac. I got into upcycling and recycling and just using repurposed materials. So these are things that are made out of pallet wood and reclaimed tiles and old slates, and they're cool boxes that sit outside the off-grid cabins. So completely off-grid cabins. They needed somewhere to store their food, so we built this as a little cold store outside. So it's stuffed with sheep's wool, and it's got the stone slab in the bottom, which acts as a heat sink, and also the soil on the top, growing herbs, helps to keep the inside cool. So just through things like that, and I did a few interior projects. A friend was opening a bar, so I built lots of shelves out of old wine boxes, and I think some pallet wood in there. And their bathrooms were all fitted out with reclaimed furniture, and old their washstands were made from, I think, old enamel bowls and ceramic sinks that we got from the salvage yard. So just some fun, interesting things out of recycled materials.
Creative.
Some of the lights in the bus were made from old washing drums and oil lamps that are refitted with LED bulbs. Give them a new lease of life. And then it led on to bigger things. And some of the material, this is just a kind of an exploration of some of the materials I've worked with. So the bottom two pictures of the first straw bale building I built, the meditation space, when we were traveling, which there was a concrete slab in place at the site that it's on. And we just built off that with some brickwork, and then some timber ladder structure with hazel pegs in it that took the straw bales. And we built before we put the bales in, we built the roof to give us a little bit of protection, and then built the walls up straw and lowered the roof onto the bales to compress it. And then the whole thing rendered with lime. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the finished pictures, but yeah.
Well, that's finished because that's not your picture.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's later because look at the growth. Yeah. That's one of Helen's pictures that I picked.
And then the top pictures are the straw bale building I built on Skye, which is Skye's very first straw bale building. And the owner wanted to do as much as possible herself. Her son had been involved building straw bale buildings in Finland for a while, just volunteering on projects. So he came back to work on this with me and with Emma and all the local volunteers that came in and helped at various stages. So it sits on car tire foundations, which are used car tires, and they're rammed with pea shingle to give you a really solid pier that then the timber work sits on. And in a similar way, the timber structure was built, the roof was built before we started putting the bales in. You can see the top left picture kind of shows the timber work and some temporary timber in there just to hold the roof up. We put the bales in, we lowered the roof onto the bales, and then we ratchet strapped the whole thing down, compressed it over a couple of days, and then there's the roof secured down to the base with nylon straps, and it stays there. It's still there now. So. And then it was rendered again outside with lime, and Nicola and Callum finished the inside with beautiful clay plaster. And we stayed there a few times. It's just a beautiful place to stay.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. It feels like you're being hugged by the earth, like the earth's growing up around you and is giving you a hug. The acoustics in there are really beautiful. It's just really cocoony. Totally gorgeous. Yeah, I thought we'd build our house out of straw, but James went off that idea. So we're on hemp at the moment.
I go back to straw. And just kind of being conscious of the toxicity and where materials have come from. So if I'm using timber, I like to use timber that's as local as possible, as processed as possible. So these two buildings I built earlier this year, and it's all pretty much locally grown larch or Douglas fir, locally processed, but within an 80-mile radius of where we are. And then over the last couple of years, I've been learning how to build with hemp. So hempcrete. So hempcrete is a mixture of the woody core of the hemp plant. So it's pretty much a waste product of the hemp industry. After they take away the more valuable bits, the fibers and the seeds, you're left with the woody core. You mix that with lime and a little bit of water, and you get hempcrete, which is insulating. It helps regulate moisture, and it gives you can build a monolithic wall. So what you see in the bottom left is a small building. Well, building is like a woodland store I built.
How high is it? Just to give context.
It's 4 foot, 3.5, 4 foot, maybe 4 foot, 5 foot wide. Yeah, it's a little cube, and we had a climate action festival last year here on Skye, and I ran a workshop over the weekend as an introduction to building with hemp, and we built this little woodland store for the local forest school, so they can store their gear there. They don't have to traipse it back to secure storage. So just a little building, and then the top right picture was a house that I renovated at the end of last year, which was an old stone-built croft house. This room in particular was freezing in the winter and very humid in the summer, so that the hemp works really well in that environment, helps regulate the humidity through the summer, and keeps it warm during the winter. The lady whose house it has had a piano in there that she could never ever play because it was too cold, too humid. The keys got stuck, and now she's got a room back. She plays the piano, and she says she's got a room that she never had before. She loves that. And then the top left and bottom right are a building built with a friend earlier this year. So he has been into building with hemp for a little while, but never built anything, and they are planning on building a house later this year. So this was a building that we put up on their land, which they're going to rent out as a holiday studio, which was just to experiment with the material before they built that house, get to know it, get to know how it works. So we put this up in February, which people asked, can you build with these materials in February? And we gave it a go, and we had horizontal rain, but it's all dried out okay. We managed to get it done.
Can you say a bit about how it's built?
So yeah, the hemp, how it's built is you build a timber frame, which is the structure of the building, and then you build around that a temporary shutter in which to cast the hempcrete. So you infill that with the hemp and lime mix. Let that go off overnight, and you move your shutter up the next day to do your next layer, your next uplift. And then once it's finished, you take the timber shuttering away, and you're left with how it looks in that bottom right picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it just led me to do some experimenting with different things. So the hempcrete, you can buy pre-cast hempcrete blocks. So the image on the very left was me experimenting with building my own interlocking hempcrete blocks.
Lego
hempcrete, which worked fine. I think I only made those two just to see how the casting process would work. Yeah, I'd like to make a few more. Just see how they dry over a longer period, stand up to the weather, etc. And then I did some workshops with the local college where we experimented with other foraged materials from the island. So working on the similar process of the hempcrete, we looked for fibres around the island. So we worked with bracken, and we also took some seaweed and some reeds, and we mixed it with different things to bind it together. So we mixed it with lime, which is traditional, and then we also tried mixing it with a gelatinous kind of seaweed alginate mix, which is actually on the next slide. I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And then the right-hand picture, that's not my work, but it's another organisation on the island, which is pretty interesting. And they are using waste from the seafood industry, so oyster and mussel shells, to make these terrazzo tiles. So they're taking waste from the restaurants and they crush the shells, burn them heat them in a kiln to make shell lime, which you can then cast. So they've cast it, then polished it to make these beautiful terrazzo tiles. And then, this further experimentation. So the gelatinous goop that I mentioned is, you see that in the bottom left, which isn't very pleasant in the kitchen, but it definitely holds the material together.
I kept coming home and the whole house stunk of something else he's cooking up in the kitchen.
And then last year, I experimented with growing flax in the garden. So there's a history of flax growing in the Highlands. It was used for making clothing, so for textiles. It was used for sailcloth, I believe, fishing nets. And there's a couple of areas up here that their name is linked to the flax industry, to Lynn. So there's a Linneycrow and there's a Lymedale, which were both flax growing areas. So I grew this in the garden. I haven't done a great deal with it, but it grew really well, and the fibres I could use as an insulation fibre or fibre to give a little bit of strength to a plaster or an earth floor, something like that. And then all this has led me to embarking on a master's degree at the Centre for Alternative Technology, CAT, in Wales. And this is some of the experimental buildings that they've got on the site down there in Wales, mid Wales. So the top left is a rammed earth structure, not my structures, but past students built these. Top left is a rammed earth, so it's just a clay-rich earth rammed, and you get this beautiful monolithic building. And then the two on the right are both, they call it the hairy house, which is a thatched straw building. Just experimental and fun. And then the straw bale theatre, which was built maybe about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's a great little space to go and attend lectures.
And built in the same way.
Built in the same way I built the two buildings that I've built. There's some more other little structures from around the site. The one on the top left was an experiment with hempcrete to see how it could be used structurally. So this is an arch with no internal structure to it. So it's just pure hemp and lime. It was cast around a formwork one day, and then the formwork was removed the next, and then left to dry, and just to see how it would, see if it would stand up. And it is doing. It's got bricks laid on top to simulate a little bit of load and a roof covering. And it's still there as far as I know. And the other two are a little workshop space. It's made out of old, well, local timber and reclaimed whiskey barrel staves. And another one where they were experimenting with burning timber to see how it added to its resilience.
And it didn't.
Well, it doesn't. No, it looks great, but it doesn't add much to it. It's a kind of Japanese technique, and there's a lot of burnt timber in Japan, and it's really quite trendy in this area at the moment. People burning timber as an aesthetic, and people believe it kind of adds to its robustness, but it doesn't. They burnt timber in Japan because they got staining. There's a kind of a natural fungi kind of staining to a lot of the timber they used, so they burnt it just to disguise that more than anything. But it does give it a certain aesthetic. And then the last time I was down at CAT, we were experimenting with different materials to build, experimenting to see how we could build to very low energy standards with some of these natural materials. So we've got earth, we've got straw, we've got hemp lime. And the objective was, to build a passive house standard, which is kind of very low energy usage in operation.
Yeah.
And this is the main building at CAT, which when I looked at it just yesterday, there's the top left image, just seeing the similarities to the circular community's vision and that roundness. So the main building, the main round building you see is the lecture theatre. That's the inside of the lecture theatre at the bottom right, which is the walls must be 5 meters tall and about a meter thick, and they are rammed earth from the local quarry. And then there's an external layer that's more suitable to the Welsh weather on the outside, which is hempcrete, hemp and lime. With zinc roofs. It's just a great place. There's student accommodation that's kind of around the round building. It's a lovely place to stay.
Beautiful lecture.
Hang out in and listen, sit, listen to the lectures in that space. The walls are so thick. It's really, it's a special place. Yeah, it's really great.
So we're aware that we've spoken for a long time, probably way more than we thought we would speak. And we wanted to just go to any questions at that point. It could be about anything, but really about this building section. And if anyone's got any questions about anything.
I've got plenty of questions.
Jason, we don't see you. Oh, maybe it's them. Oh, there we see you now.
Can you see me? Okay. I'm hearing some echo. Okay. Well, first, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. I love all the different aspects of the circular vision that you've encompassed in this. And I think it's added richness, because just talking about the buildings themselves, that doesn't make community. And if a community is formed and then they build, that's probably a different outcome than someone who tries to build and then form a community. But nonetheless, James, I really appreciate all of your experience that you've shared with eco-building. And first question is just a general one, which is, What kind of forms of eco-building have you found to be most successful and also least successful?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they all have challenges, especially with the climate that we have here on Skye, which is it's very wet. It's not very cold, but we do get a lot of rain, and it comes in horizontally rather than we don't get vertical rain. So yeah, building with straw was definitely a challenge, and that's what I think. I think the building in situ is fine. I think it's robust, but just the process of building with straw in this climate is definitely a challenge. You're forever trying to keep things dry, trying to keep straw dry, prevent it, getting soaked. So that did put me off.
I remember stories of him coming home like, oh, I just topped and untopped things all day.
It was natural building, eco building, but we used acres and acres of plastic covering it up every day. Which kind of, defeats the object. But there are methods that you could use that I've learned since. So just for very simple things, techniques that I've seen other people doing. Just using small amounts of plastic covering, so a little bit of membrane on certain elements just kind of helps to give it a bit of protection while you're building, rather than sheeting everything all the time. And then panelized products as an alternative to using actual bales. We have a lot of, in Scotland generally, there's a lot of timber frame buildings. So it's generally timber frame with block weather screening. But yeah, panelized straw bale, which would go up in a couple of days and can be wind and watertight quickly. So you haven't got that stress of having exposed bales for a month or two before you can get around to bending. And that also kind of led me to exploring building with hemp and lime, because of the you've still got a plant fiber in there, but you've got the resilience that the lime gives you, coating all the hemp fibers, and the hemp itself is pretty robust fiber in itself. So yeah, that kind of having that lime through the building, that's why I started exploring it. Is that more suitable for here? I'm still debating that. I'm in the middle of writing a paper, trying to answer that question.
That might be the dissertation topic.
Yeah, they kind of build something else that's experimental, sit it out in the wind and weather, and just see how it dries over 6 months, or if it doesn't dry.
Yeah, I guess with the straw it potentially rots, but with the hempcrete it's just whether it dries ever.
That's the question that I've kind of that's what I'm working through at the moment. Is if it doesn't dry, it might not rot, but it might not dry, and then it might not give you the performance that you're expecting because of that moisture within it.
Yeah, I actually had a question too about the hempcrete. So do you have any ways that you found of protecting it against moisture, like exterior finishes and such? I mean, I suppose the structures are typically timber framed, so you could attach any kind of material to the timber frame to protect the hempcrete. But I'm just curious if you've found any particular methods of doing the finishes that are successful.
Yeah, so I've not done much physical experimentation, but theoretical research that I've been doing just recently. I've been modeling different scenarios with the hempcrete and in this climate here in Scotland. So looking at exactly that, different finishes. So just looking at a rendered finish, looking at then adding like a wood fiberboard installation outside of that, and then rendering that, and then adding rain screen on top of that. And what I do find is that if you add a rain screen cladding, timber rain screen, it seems to almost impede the drying, because you're not getting the drying from the wind and the solar radiation that you get if you've just got a rendered finish. So a render with some sort of waterproofer on the outside, which you can get waterproofers that allow it to still breathe, so the moisture will still come out, but the liquid, the rain won't penetrate from the outside. That works the best. They're very expensive coatings, but they seem to do the job. So yeah, as Joe said, the dissertation topic might be to build a section of wall with some of these different treatments and see how they actually work in practice rather than just theory.
Yeah, thank you. I'll give others a chance to ask questions before I ask any more.
Maybe you and James need to just do a Zoom sometime, Jason.
That would be fun. Yeah, I would enjoy that. Yeah.
It might be helpful to stop sharing for a moment while people are asking questions, because I think Rebecca raised her hand. Oh, and she has a hand raised there.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing. That was fascinating, of course. I was wondering, it's not so much related to the building, because I don't build things. I want someone to build it for me and then I'll go live in it, like, for sure. But I'm like not building it. I'm sorry, everyone. But but whoever wants to build it for me, I'm into it. I wondered about your kids and having this like somewhat alternative like lifestyle, like how they liked it or how they felt about it. Because you can like show us pictures and stuff, but like as their parents, yeah, I'm curious like what that experience was like for them.
I should go and get them in to answer that. So Annie's nearly 16, and one of the subjects she loves is English, and last year she chose, or maybe the year before, she chose to write a reflective essay on like the formative experience of living in a bus, and how that was for her. So she reflected on it and reflected on some of the things like, I mean, I think for a while, you know, that age of 12 to 14, they go through where they don't want to be different at all. They don't want to stand out. She wouldn't tell people then, but she does now. And our son's in that kind of not telling people phase, but it's Skye, it's small, everybody knows we're the people that lived in a bus. So yeah, for her, I mean, she appreciated like how adaptable it's made her, how like living with uncertainty. So we had a home, but we didn't have places to park it a lot of the time. So we wouldn't know where we were going to sleep that night. So we literally live with that uncertainty. Will we find any wood for the fire? Will we know where we can park tonight, where it feels safe and we're all okay? Yeah, and not knowing from one day to the next what we were going to do. So they didn't have those normal routines of going to school. So I think she sees that has made her really adaptable and flexible and able to step into new situations with new people. And she's pretty confident, isn't she? I mean, she's quiet, but she's quietly confident, if that makes sense. Before she homeschooled, she went to 4 different primary schools too. Oh no, before and after. So she's had that experience of going and meeting new people a lot. She's incredibly calm and incredibly patient with her younger brother. And she lived really well with him in a tiny space. I mean, they slept on bunks next to each other until, you know, she was 12 years old by the time we moved out. So it was time. She really needed that privacy and that space at the age of 12. but she's just so patient with him, and I mean that's the quality that everyone says when they speak about Annie, is that she's calm, and she's, you know, she comes to weddings with me when I am going to officiate at a wedding. She comes with me because she grounds and calms. She's like just brilliant to be around. So I don't know if you want to say more about how she felt about that experience.
I don't think Annie reflected on it much until the last couple of years, and I think she's realised just how special that time was, and I think it's something that she's only come to appreciate. They loved it at the time. They loved the freedom of exploring different things, and the experiences they had meeting people. But I think, yeah, I don't think she reflected on it until later, just what that opportunity gave them both. And they both are self-motivated learners through that. Oscar especially, we can't teach him a thing. And we've learned since that time never to even try to teach him anything. It's pointless. But give him the resources that he needs to do that, and yeah, he can, yeah, he'll achieve what he needs to.
Oh, and then sorry, one more follow-up question to that. Like your own growing up and childhoods and stuff, like what was that? What was it? I don't know if I missed it in there. I don't think you guys mentioned it, but like how you grew up versus how you're living now, or you know.
We didn't mention it. I think we both had fairly standard
Very
upbringing.
Conventional, yeah. Yeah.
So we went to school. We didn't homeschool. Our parents wouldn't have even thought about homeschooling us. We didn't travel. We went on holidays. You know, because what's normal here when we were children is go camping in France or somewhere in the UK, or, you know, we did that kind of holiday. It's pretty conventional. Parents that worked, mums that stayed at home for periods of our childhood. Yeah, I think we're quite different to our families.
And our siblings still follow that kind of conventional model, both our siblings. Yeah, so
and a lot of our friends. James and I went to school together, so from being 13, but we weren't together till we were 26, 27. But a lot of our friends in school are really conventional. They work for the council, they work for their teachers, they
same job they've been in for 30 years or 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And we seem to reinvent it not reinvent it, but just evolve it.
Every 3 to 5 years, maybe. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for answering those kind of little bit intimate questions, but I'm very curious about how people, you know, come into these kinds of lifestyles.
Yeah, I guess we didn't. It felt really hard to know where to start the story. There's a bit of backstory in that when we first got together, we travelled. So we went to Australia and travelled in Southeast Asia. And so that was kind of formative in our relationship. And, you know, we learned new ways of being, experienced different communities, different ways of living. So that was kind of there. And then I mentioned we went to New Zealand and we traveled. So that was 2011. And so Oscar he was just over 1 at that point. And so we were traveling around, we got married there. We had this experience of bus living that then contributed to us moving into a caravan. So it feels like people go, how do you get from there to a bus? I used to be an IT consultant, earn loads of money. The only thing that was ever in my fridge was Veuve Clicquot champagne. I would travel away from home Monday to Friday every week. And it was kind of like, my friend said, write the bus that's Veuve Clicquot to living on a bus. Write the book that's Veuve Clicquot to living on a bus. You know, how did that happen? But it's been very incremental over the years. And the way we are in relationship, we we kind of do this. I mean, when we travelled in Australia, one would step in and do all the organising, the other would get to relax a bit, step back, and then 3 days later this would happen. And so, and that's how we've lived together. We've been together 21 years this year. Yeah, married 11. And this is how we live. So one can step into the earning role for a while, and the other one has more of a childcare role or whatever else is going on, a study role, and then we do this. So I finished my ministry training 2 years ago, and then it was James's turn to then start his master's training. And actually the kids look after themselves and us a little bit these days. They do a lot more around, so it's less about childcare. But while we were traveling, you know, James had the kids around a lot and would be exchanging, and I'd zip off, get a hire car, do a few days work, and then go find them again. So yeah, it's, I guess we're not very conventional in terms of our relationship and who does what. We are able to flex and adapt for whatever we want to do next, and we encourage each other in our craziness. So, you know, one of us goes, oh, I think we should do this. And the other one goes, yeah, let's do it. So that happens a lot. So anyone?
Oh yeah, thank you, Joe and James. This was really magical in a way. I appreciate your pioneering hearts and sharing your life uncommon with us. And I'm really, really curious about that hempcrete now. I think Jason and I are both going to start doing some more investigation with that. In different climates, it may be different. I think what is so inspiring about your paths is that the adaptability that you were talking about with your daughter, because with what is happening in our world right now, we have to learn how to be adaptable. And the more adaptable we'll be, the more likelihood the next 7 generations will be able to live on this planet. I was right off the bat very interested and curious about your disappointment in joining a community that wasn't really a community. And there's so many of these intentional communities. I've met many people across the globe who have either been a part of communities or, you know, stayed with them, worked with them for a while, and then left and came back to the over-acculturation, which is the dominant culture. And recently found out that even Oroville, which was the closest to the vision that has come through my conduit, it's not my vision, I don't own it. I feel like the earth is working through many of us to re-envision and adapt to learning how to be in community, or we won't survive because we are communal beings. And did you investigate any other communities like Findhorn, and did it appeal to you at all? And obviously, if people are not working together and in council together, if they don't have elders for a council to make decisions, and we're still doing the business as usual, even in an intentional community, because we don't know how to be adaptable. We don't have that curious mind like you two do, to see what will work if we try this or try that, try different avenues. What is your sense of where the world is going?
Yeah, I think oh, sorry. I think there's a couple of things occurring. So we did explore Findhorn a little. I think at some point we didn't want Oscar to go to mainstream school because he would have been quite young going in, and this was part of our traveling for a year and taking him out of school. And so we were looking at Steiner education, and we looked at 2 Steiner schools and we visited them and explored them. And one was in North Yorkshire, so not far from where we were when we set off. Where we lived in the caravan was in Yorkshire. And we looked at a Steiner school there, and that was in a community. It was a Camp Hill community. So people with learning difficulty, living in a community with people supporting them. And then this Steiner school was in that. But the Steiner school felt like it was on its last legs, and they didn't seem to have enough students there at the time to keep it going. And there were also some things, like there were some things we loved about Steiner, but then there were some things that we weren't sure about when we looked into it a bit more. So that was one place we kind of investigated, but it didn't feel feasible because we weren't sure it was going to carry on, and so it didn't feel like we could find home there if it wasn't, and we didn't know. And the other place we looked was Forres, which is right by Findhorn. We went and walked around the park, Findhorn Park, and again, there was a lot of things to love about Findhorn and love about the community there, but I didn't like it. I just got a funny vibe from it. I just didn't, both from Findhorn itself and the school in Forres. And again, there was a lot I loved about it. I mean, one of my really good friends now is a Steiner teacher at that school. And there's, you know, I love the creativity, the presentation of their work, the subjects they explore, the way they go into things, the physical stuff that they do, the ethos of teaching, like helping children explore their physicality and then their emotions before they then go into their intelligence and their academic studies. There's tons about it I love, and the more I find out, the more I love. But I just I didn't have a good vibe over there. And there's something about, you know, over there it's very different to here. The West Coast is so wild and rugged, and yeah, I really love that. And there it's more kind of farmland, and yeah. So for me, it never felt like the Findhorn community was an option, because I just didn't get the vibe. But here, there's a lot about this community that's amazing, and it's still traditional in lots of ways. You know, people live in their own houses. It's not living in shared space together. But there's a lot of skills in this community, and there's a lot of knowledge, and there's a lot of growing, and there's a lot of working with wool, and there's a lot of fishing, and there's just so many skills and interesting people. And where we've bought the plot, it's like a township, so it's not got any shops or anything like that. It's big areas of land divided into crops. But I could see that could be a trading community and a skill sharing community. And so everyone's got their own bit of land. But then there's the community centre. There is a centre. Yeah, so I mean, we're new in that community. We do know some people. But I think for me, living in community feels hard. It feels hard to share space with people, but I think living in my own space, you know, we lived on other people's land for years, and that got to a point where it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want my own little corner where I can do what I want and I don't have to worry about whether we're upsetting people. That got really hard in the end. So to have my own place to be, even that being a rented house, as long as I've not got a landlord breathing down my neck, feels more spacious and easier to be. But having people around, a virtual community, you know, a local geographical community, a community of spiritual, like-minded folk, different communities that feed all the different aspects is where I'm at the moment. And maybe, you know, I can see in old age I might want more of a community, or when the children were young, more of a close community where people are sharing tasks and things. But I think in this kind of midlife phase, I feel like I just need a bit of my own space. I don't know what you want to share about that.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about how this community feels compared to other communities and areas that we've lived in. So as an area, as a community, this does feel more like our community than any of the other places that we've lived together, I would say, and that we do feel very kind of part of it. Kids go to school, we're quite embedded in it, which again has been unconscious, I suppose. It's not been a conscious effort to really kind of get involved in the community, be part of it, but we've just become part of it in different ways.
I remember in March in the bus, so the first year we set off in September 2014, and in March 2015 we were on the beach and we were having a conversation about what was important. And actually it was more, I was asking you about what was important, and the words that came are the words that we put on the wall in the bus, and they were contribution, to be able to contribute, creativity. For me, I would add in connection, and then the fourth word was community. And so I think when we were transient, we did have a virtual community, but we didn't have a local community. And you say it wasn't intentional, but I think when we landed here, we decided to get involved in things, because we're not really in the past people that have joined in with things. But here, like, we do everything. James went to boat building. I would do Pilates, yoga, any art class that came up, a knitting group. The kids, Annie plays fiddles, she goes to girls group, she does kayaking. Oscar plays shinty, which is like a violent hockey, Scotland, football, youth club. So we do a lot, and that's really connected us a lot with the community. Yeah.
Sounds like you found your sweet spot on the earth.
I also didn't. I thought it was an exclusivity to it, which I didn't like. It doesn't feel, inclusive.
Yeah, I think that's important with community. The next CCV is going to be about reading the book Instructions to the Cook, which is based on Dogen's writings, and taking all of the ingredients of your life and making the supreme meal. And in community, I think community includes all of those other things that you talked about: connection and respect, and all of that becomes a community, because community doesn't exist without all of the elements. But I'm happy for you that you found this space on Isle of Skye, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves and moves as you're experimenting with the food and with knitting. You know, Gandhi said we need to be living in small communities. We need to be making our own clothes, growing our own food, and trading with each other, to not have an economy, and to not send people to the city where they starve. And so it seems like you're doing that. I do have a question about that cold box that you created, James, out of the repurposed lumber and materials. How cold does it get? Does it work pretty well as a cold box?
I don't know how cold it got. I think, it's, as a cool box does, the more you put in it, yeah, the longer, the better it worked. But yeah, they did the job they needed to do. The stone slab really helped. So you put things that, you know, on top of, you put cold things in top, that takes, you know, absorbs that cooler energy, and then the soil on top, keep it watered, and the cool of the night, yeah, kind of replenishes that each day. So yeah, as a concept, it worked. There's a yeah, it was based on a kind of a similar kind of technology. There's clay, with clay pots. I don't know what they're called, but they kind of, yeah, they whip up water and they store the cool of the night, and then yeah, you put your dairy produce in them.
Well, my
Yeah,
mountain. Oh, okay. My mountain granny only went to town to buy toilet paper. She had apiaries. She grew her own food. She traded with the ranchers in the area. And she had a cold cellar that was built into the ground, into the earth, and could keep things there. By the time I came around, she had an ice box, you know, electric refrigerator ice box. But she used the cold cellar for quite a bit of things, because she would can her own food and fruits and wild fruits, and she did a lot of wild foraging as well as growing, and it was quite the pioneer in that way, and also used indigenous, I think, background. She was amazing, and I think a lot of our learning, you called it learning new skills. It's actually learning old skills that for some reason we didn't get from our grandmothers. You know, I didn't get it from my grandmother. She let me run wild on the ranch that she took care of for people who lived in Alabama, you know, and so I'm just fascinated with your ability to like be curious and try to build new things and use new materials, and that also is going to help the world become more adaptable as we're dancing, you know, circular communities awake around the planet. This whole idea and actually action of being curious and experimenting is what's going to help us adapt to what comes, what is coming, and what comes. And very cool. So yeah. I don't have any more. I don't have any questions at the moment. I'm just still trying to integrate everything that you shared with us.
I have a bit more, a few more slides. So we were just going to talk a little bit about growing, but that will be short, but maybe just share some things with you that you might not do in your part of the world, and maybe a little bit about foraging. And then I've got a piece on spirituality, but I'm not sure about sharing that. Maybe just sharing a bit about my ministry to finish off. We probably don't have a lot more time because we need to go and cook dinner, or at least see if the kids have managed to cook dinner. But maybe we could just run through some of those things over the next 20 minutes or so, and then just see where we're at. Does that feel okay for people? Okay, let me share the screen.
I want to thank a lot. I'm very moved about your vitality, creativity, your braveness, the way you live. I just want to, and I'm in a very different position or situation, but I just thought maybe if I know some people, may I get in contact with you or with Lumi just to connect, because it's wonderful. I'm touched. So, wow.
Thank you.
You did it, you do it, you live it.
Thank you.
But at the same time now, I have night as you coming, and I have something else. So I have to say goodbye now. But thank you very much. It was very wonderful to have this insights, and getting
Thank you,
touch.
Romana.
Thank you very much.
Joining us. And yeah, feel free to get in touch. And
Okay.
then we can share our
Thank you. And thank you, Lumi, and all together.
Thank you, Drumming Heart. I'll connect you with Joe.
Thank you. Let me. Oh, it's not letting me move. Okay, the presentation's just doing something weird. Hang on one sec. No, not from the beginning. Sorry, click, click, click. Okay. So yeah, just a little bit about growing food. Like I said, we're totally not experts. We're just learning. And I find it incredibly frustrating that everything's so trial and error. Like last year, we grew loads of cucumbers, and this year they don't grow at all. So I'm always like not understanding why, but I think we have to grow for decades to notice the patterns. It's hard to notice them in 3 years. Like everything getting eaten by slugs one year and working out which bed to put different things in. And then I guess we start again when we move to our plot. But we've got a neighbour who grows so much, and she's been there for 5 years. So I said to her, we'll just take all your learning. We'll just plant what you know works. So, and really I want to move towards more perennials just to make it easier so that we're not having to plant every year, and also being aware of how much we plant, because can get totally overwhelmed in summer just trying to keep everything going. So here's some of the things that we've grown over the last 3 years. Our rhubarb, onions. Last year, James said he wasn't doing anything at the allotment. He did end up doing things, but because he was focused on his master. So I said, I'm just growing 150 onions then. So we grew a lot of onions last year. And then I'd not thought about drying them, storing them. I didn't think about any of that. So when it came to pick them, we put them all over the kids' trampoline to dry in the sun. Luckily, we had a bit of sunshine that week. And then I platted some of them, and some went in the boiler cupboard to dry out. So it's all learning all the time. This was a rainbow harvest. Some of the half-eaten kale. We swapped last year some of our onions for somebody's pink fir potatoes. So this year, I don't think these are pink fir, but this year we're growing pink fir potatoes, which are really tasty. Our tomatoes never go red or in enough quantity, so we often make those into chutneys. This year our strawberries are better than ever. I think there's pictures from, maybe I took it yesterday. I don't know. Anyway, the strawberries are good this year, but we bought those as plants. Most things we grow from seed, and we grow them in the kitchen and then we put them out. Our blackcurrants are our best growing thing. I said we got 5 kilos last year, but we just keep taking cuttings and sticking them in the ground, and then they grow. It's amazing. We've got a blackcurrant farm going on. This is an example of one of the beds outside. I don't know what that is.
That's
growing.
potatoes.
That's potatoes.
Yeah.
So we use seaweed to replenish the soil at the end of the year, and that's a common practice here. Everyone drags stuff up off the shore. It's usually the rotten stuff, and so we're also moving towards less dig and more just getting the soil to replenish itself. So last year we put down cardboard to suppress the weeds, and then seaweed on top. And we were just discussing whether we put compost on top of that to grow in this year or not, or we just kind of moved the seaweed and went underneath it back into the soil. And we think we did. We don't think we put compost on this year at all. And I just think it's total magic that things grow year after year. And, you know, I always think we have to put things into the soil, but just a layer of compost, it's just a layer of seaweed in the autumn, and then to start again in the spring seems to be doing it at the moment.
Yeah,
we're not doing much to feed the soil, but
yeah,
I think if you,
I don't think we overexploit the soil.
yeah, we're not over exploiting it. We're not digging it unless, you know, if it's unnecessary, we don't dig it and we're putting the seaweed in. But to me, I feel like we ought to be doing more to that. But perhaps that's
and
enough.
we do use the compost from the hopping.
Yeah.
So that goes onto it, so our food waste.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say really about growing food. But I just wanted to say a little bit about foraging. So we've done a few foraging courses over the years in different places that we've lived, and we've got some a really cool couple here who do some foraging courses, and we know them because we started going to their supper club, and they're really keen to produce unused locally grown food and forage food, and they did taster menus that were amazing with juices to match to every course, and just incredible. My favorite thing they ever made, I think, was sorrel ice cream, which was kind of a bright green color and just so tasty. But we learned a lot about foraging seaweeds from them, and apparently all the UK seaweeds are edible, so you can eat any of them. So obviously that's really good when you're foraging, then, to know that you're not going to eat something that's going to kill you. As long as it's still growing, so it's still attached, and you know, it's after high tide, so everything's pretty fresh, then it's good to eat. So she said, you know, you can eat them all. Some of them are pretty disgusting, and some of them, if you eat, like, cook them, they turn into jelly, you know, like that mush James made when he was building experiments. Yeah, so that, I mean, that's really good to know. If we're going to have an apocalypse, we can survive on seaweed. Yeah, I mean, here where we are, we're probably 8 hours drive away from where we lived before, and that's far in the UK. You know, I know in the US that's not big distances, but it is here. And our supply chain's not great. So when we had lockdowns and COVID and people were ill, we noticed it a lot in the shops. When I say the shops, I mean the shop, because there's only one. The Co-op supermarket here. Yeah, so the whole, like, food, not having food and needing to be sustainable, I think is a big deal here, because we could lose those supply chains. Here the fuel price has gone totally crazy, and so again that's pushing food prices up, but it's also making us at risk of not being able to access food. So to grow our own, to forage, I think is important. So we're close to the sea, we're an island, so we do have access to some of that, some of the seafood. Not that we really forage for much in terms of seafood.
No, I mean, it was interesting that through the lockdowns of 2020, the availability of seafood locally increased. A lot of our seafood is shipped to Spain, so they fish a lot of langoustine in the area, and they're exported directly to Spain, and we don't see them. So what was interesting through that period was it wasn't being exported, but it was available locally here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the restaurants weren't open. Sorry. So yeah, stuff became more available. We could access more of that. Yeah, that is interesting. And then I suppose the other things we might forage here are like the really obvious things, like wild garlic. So wild garlic pesto, and the easy thing, hazelnuts. I want to go looking for this year. So it's coming up to hazelnut time, I think, here. And mushrooms. Yeah, so but again, not very experienced in it. So we have hedgehog mushrooms. I don't know if you have hedgehog mushrooms. Do you have those? Yeah, no, I don't know.
There,
No.
yes, we have hedgehogs, we have hawk's wings, we have boletes, porcini, king boletes, yeah, puffballs.
Yeah, so we have some of those, and we have belief. But I'm just not very experienced. I keep going out with different people and trying to learn more. Last year we ate some chanterelles. We've had sets this year, but they were given to us by a friend. Yeah, so yeah, we're just learning about all of that. So that's our kind of food growing. And then I'm going to skip, I think, into my ministry and just talk for 10 minutes about that, maybe. So close your eyes. This is all, we might come back to that if there's time and we're interested. But I said I was ordained as a minister in 2020. The first ministry I was called to was around abuse and abuse of the feminine. So I work at the moment 2.5 days a week in a support role here on the island, which is challenging because sometimes we know people. Yeah, as a support worker for women who've experienced or are experiencing domestic abuse. So providing emotional and practical support. So the emotional support often is just listening, and depending on where they are at on their journey, it can be like from the crisis of it's happening to years and years, decades down the line, trying to heal and recover from that abuse. And for me, I feel like the abuse of the feminine it has the same roots as the abuse of the earth. And so, you know, it being in patriarchy and capitalism. So they feel like my callings, those two things. And somehow I've ended up picking up wedding work and ceremony work. I mean, through my ministry training, I absolutely love ceremony. I think I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, working with abuse. So I think this work is healing me and it's helping to heal others. And where I'm working around abuse of the earth, I think that's quite a lot in my ceremony work. I'll come to the ceremony work, but this is my ministry. I write every day on Instagram about my ministry, and it's different things all the time because people think when you're a minister that you just hold weddings and that's all you do. So I kind of look at it as all aspects of my life. So this is my mum ministry. Yeah, they're quite young there. Well done, my books. And my wife ministry. I do some of that sometimes when assignments get hard, usually. Yeah, and I host Wheel of the Year circles. So I have a group of women of the wheel, and we gather every 6 weeks. And so our next festival will be the Equinox Mabon. And so we come together and hold ceremony together online. And this year it's an annual program. So the people that signed up in bulk in February, and then we're working together throughout the year. So it helps me connect with the earth. It helps me notice what's happening. It helps me be in community with other women to go through those thresholds of the year. And it keeps me present to where we are in the year and seasons. So this is just one of my altars, I think, from maybe solstice. I mentioned weddings. So there's a big wedding trade on Skye because it's so beautiful and dramatic here. So lots of people come here to elope. And I mentioned we got married in New Zealand. We eloped. We didn't tell anyone. And I think if we'd known that this was happening on Skye, we might have done it here. Yeah, so beautiful, intimate, personal. I don't have a religion, just a spirituality. So when people come to me to get married, it's about working with them and what their beliefs are and how they want to honor themselves and each other and their relationship and their union. So the ceremonies are written specifically for them and include whatever whatever they want included, basically, and are often somewhere like this, which is the Kerrang, or the Fairy Glen, or the like, all beautiful locations. And Sonia, who I met, or Ganga, who I met Lisa Marie through, does a lot of this work. Yeah, and so she handed me a lot of weddings this year. Doing some of her work this year. Also, like, I like to be creative. This is a piece I stitched. I don't know if it's stitched at that point, but yeah, it was a piece which went to COP26, which was in Glasgow this year, where the leaders met to talk about yeah, what they're committing to in terms of climate change and 1.5 degrees, staying under 1.5 degrees. So I made two pieces. This was one which was prayers for the earth. So I wrote my prayers on the flags. They're both, the two pieces I made are both a metre wide. So this is like craftivism, and I'd love to do more of this because I think it just brings together the art and creativity into making a difference in something that I care about. The other piece said the words, when the children asked, when the earth was dying, what did you do? How will you answer? And that quote just really moves me, you know, to think about the children, as Limi said before, 7 generations. You know, what are they going to look back on? So some of my work is around earth, creating ceremony for the earth, bringing people together to grieve for the earth. And it feels like that's my answer to that question. You know, when they look back and ask what we did at this time, some of this ministry and some of this work that I do is my answer to that. This is just, I guess, creativity, but just being intentional in life. This was a blessings branch that I created for someone who was going to be ordained this year, and sent to her in the post. I've never met her, but we've spoken and I followed her journey. So I wrote blessings and I bound them to a branch, but the branch appeared to me out on a walk, and it's the same shape as a branch I made for myself a couple of years ago. And it was just on my path as I thought of her, and then I thought, oh, I've got a feather on my blessings branch, and then a feather appeared to me. So this kind of feels like conversation with nature happens quite a lot. I run women's circles, so host different kinds of women's circles. I mentioned the Wheel of the Year circle. I run an Exploring Spirituality circle with a group, and this was a circle in the woods, bringing together a small group, maybe 10 women, to spend time in nature and to rest and relax and rejuvenate after COVID and reconnect. So yeah, I step into that space. This is death cafes. I've run some death cafes locally. As part of my ministry training, I explored like my whole life from birth to death, and was involved in writing my own funeral and writing a funeral for someone else on my course. So this is about bringing people together in spaces to talk about death. And interestingly, well, sadly, very sadly, I ran some with a counsellor friend recently. We ran 2, and within a couple of weeks, one of the people that was on the cafe, her father died. And she said to me, I came to because I feel like I needed to get more comfortable around death. And then yeah, she lost her dad a couple of weeks later. So just so important to create those spaces. And I don't know if the news got as far as there, but we've just had a tragedy on Skye. You know, it's such a sleepy place, but recently there was a stabbing and a shooting, one event, one incident. And we ran the death cafes in the community where that's happened. So it feels like, you know, it's weird synchronicity but it's so important just to create those spaces for people to talk about trauma and to talk about death. And this is a nest. I don't know if it's one I made for me or I made for someone else, but just the sense that what my ministry is to me is like walking alongside people. I was this morning holding spiritual counseling for someone, and just telling her what a privilege and an honor it is to be invited to walk alongside someone in their journey. And so this nest is kind of representative of this space. So I feel like it's walking alongside and holding space for people to be with their emotions, to be with death, to feel into, to heal, to learn how to hold themselves. So yeah, that's a bit about my ministry. So I think in terms of the circular community vision, that feels about the piece I skipped over, the spirituality, was all about my spiritual practices and how I minister to myself. But then this ministry is my social activism, my social conscience, how I bring my gifts to the world, I guess.
Oh, thank you so much, my beloved sister. I don't have so many questions as I see you dancing a circular community awake where you're at. And the spirituality is a part of that, a big part of it. And as you saw in our vision, we want to have a Zendo / Kiva / sweat lodge available. And we want our community to be open to anyone to come who needs holding, who needs to be in ceremony. I think dancing life awake is ceremony, and our overculturation does not do ceremonies. They do weddings, we do funerals, but there's not it's very dry. It doesn't have the spirit in them. And I'm saying this from experience, because I've played so many funerals and so many weddings and bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, rites of passages that are basically been crystallized. So you sharing what you're doing on Isle of Skye with the women there, healing that divine feminine, as we are represented, not even representatives, we are the earth, and so are men. But by healing the women, we're also going to be healing the men. And it's so beautiful to have you here presenting and meeting James for the first time. That's awesome. We hear you're quiet and shy, so thank you for being here. And I'm gonna leave this up for questions. It looks like Rebecca's got a question.
I don't have a question. I wanted to know if I could share something with you guys briefly. Is that okay?
Please.
It's a physical thing. It's just so weird that you guys were talking about your stuff. Because remember I was showing you I wrote those books. Like I wrote this book. And we have a bilingual version of it. And it's called Roughing It. And it's about two pugs that go and they get a caravan and they start a new life. And so
it's a life story, isn't it?
It's like they're here, they're living in Madrid, and then their parents are artists and they don't want to live in the world anymore with the regular people. They got sick of watching TV and stuff. So they go out. The pandemic made them reevaluate their life. And they move and they go live by the sea in a caravan. Even though everything is very expensive, they do it, and their love keeps them together. And then like they just start, so they have so much fun, they want to change it up, and then like they do that. Then they ask their friends to give them money so they can buy land. And then they start a commune for artists. And it starts on the weekends where they're just like, they practice, they do their thing. And then like, it turns into this like, kind of like a school almost, where they teach people how to paint, and the pugs are like doing it. And like, they just, and it's all my dream. It's like that's the one line I love. Poets and painters and music makers all got together on those few acres. And like they just do their thing. And so it was so funny to like hear you talking about that, because that's like, this is like one of my dreams, is to like have like an artist commune, you know, or whatever. So it was cool to see you guys doing it. And I thought it was really funny that book, I just wrote that like last
You wrote the book of our lives, Rebecca. That's so amazing. So these groups are so amazing for that, and the synchronicity that happened in this study group. It's incredible. I love that. Can I buy it?
I can put it, it's on, I hate to be, I'm like, it's on Amazon, and like
what's it called?
This one is called Roughing It. It's called Maurice and Vera Roughing It, or Cambian de Rumbo. This one is in Spanish and in English. Ken's gonna put the link, but it's only because I'm writing one right now called, I wrote it already. We're just doing the images for it, but it's called Maurice and Vera Off the Grid. And it's about building sustainable houses
on Skye.
And it's in poetry. I write it like in Spanish and in English, but then it's like a story. And so like, that was another reason I wanted to come today. We come when we come, but like, because in my thing, I'm just kind of like, I gloss over it. I'm like, they got excited about new designs, like recycled cans. And now I can put in something about like straw or like hempcrete or something, you know, like I can try to, because at the end of the books, like this one, at the end, we have the note is, if you're interested in community land trusts, rules vary by location. Please consult with your local officials and a lawyer if thinking about purchasing communal land.
I love
I'm
it.
really into community land trusts. Also, that's like another thing I'm very like curious.
Oh, that's so brilliant. I've got, oh, hang on. I thought I had the link, but here's another one. Let me just save the link. Hang on. I don't want to miss
the rest of them.
Oh yeah. There's like I do. Like this.
And for the recording, this is Rebecca Henderson speaking, and she's the one who wrote the books. So you can go to Amazon and check her out.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Okay.
Funny, right?
Oh wait, I'm just trying to copy these links. No, why is it not copying? Oh my god.
I can email you too. Sorry, I know this is being recorded, so
I'll connect both of you, okay?
Okay. Not working. It doesn't want me to copy them. Thanks so much for sharing that, Rebecca. I love that. I know that they're going to end up living in a hempcrete house, but they might live in a yurt on the way. Yeah, so there's the yurt too. So that's brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting us. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, just email us. Lumi has our details. I'll make sure you've got James's if you don't have already. Maybe Jason and James are going to have a Zoom and a chat some more. Yeah, it's been really good.